So, folks, there is an ongoing case with a man named Abrego Garcia. He is a man who was detained in Maryland. He has multiple children. He married a U.S. citizen, but he was detained in Maryland and then summarily, without any kind of trial, any kind of day in court, no opportunity to plead his innocence whatsoever, was shipped out of the United States to El Salvador, a country that he had a court order barring him from being deported to. And once in El Salvador, he was placed into a concentration camp that the government of El Salvador wants to make profitable with slave labor. It is a torture camp. People have died there. It is about as close to like hell on earth as you can get. And the images that have come out of it are horrible. And I'll show one in a bit here. But after shipping him over there, after kidnapping him and, sending him without a trial to a concentration camp, the administration has been trying to justify this by branding Abrego Garcia as a terrorist, as a gang member, as, someone who engaged in human trafficking, is like one of the latest, completely unfounded and without any evidence whatsoever to their claims. They've just been like throwing this out there, and there is new evidence against him in that regard, and that is very specifically, Pam Bondi released what she touted as new evidence against Mr. Abrego Garcia. It's not new. It's the gang worksheet from the disgraced cop in 2019, but it does explain this ridiculous claim by Tricia McLaughlin. She thought a picture of a hoodie was the same thing as rolls of actual cash. So the new evidence is that they have a picture of him in a hoodie, and they've been claiming that it's a gang hoodie, and he had rolls of cash with like the faces of presidents X'd out. It's bizarre as hell, and there's just no substance to any of those claims whatsoever. And yeah, it's all bullshit. And you know how we know it's bullshit? Because if it wasn't, they would have presented it in court. They would have done this via legal processes if it had any merit whatsoever. Okay? That's it. They lie as they breathe. Every word out of this administration is lies. Like, if you have the evidence, why didn't you bring this to court? Why didn't you give him his due process rights? We know why. It's because they're full of shit. Okay? I feel like, I know I swear a lot on this show. I know I throw out a lot of uncouth language that probably prevents some people from watching the show, and I apologize, but like, this is just full of shit. This is shit. Like, there's no other words. I need to be blunt about it. Like, I have an English degree. I can be less blunt. But like, I feel like this requires bluntness to kind of break through some people. Like, we had someone in chat the other day arguing that like, well, I'm sure all of the people sent to these prisons are bad guys. And it's just like, no, most of the people who got deported by the Trump administration here had no criminal record. The vast majority of them. And even like if you don't count people who had no actual like charges, just like maybe they had charges, if you bring them out of the mix, the percentage of people who did not actually get charged with anything goes to like 90%. Okay? Like, and there are people out there who genuinely believe that. Okay, you can say that the people yesterday were trolling. There are people out there who genuinely, because of the media bubble they live in, have not heard that. Okay, and I mean, like this is where we're at with a lot of the language from the administration that's on Fox News every day. Here's JD Vance. Consider that Joe Biden allowed approximately 20 million illegal aliens into our country. This placed extraordinary burdens on our country. Our schools, hospitals, housing, and other essential services were overwhelmed. On top of that, many of these illegal aliens committed violent crimes or facilitated fentanyl and sex trafficking. That is the situation we inherited. And I just want to say, like, citation needed. You're making some really extraordinary claims. I'm going to require some extraordinary evidence there, bud. But yeah, let's keep going. The American people elected the Trump administration to solve this problem. The president has successfully stopped the inflow of illegal aliens, and now we must deport the people who came here illegally. To say the administration must observe due process is to beg the question, what process is due is a function of our resources, the public interest, the status of the accused, the proposed punishment, and so many other factors. To put it in concrete terms, imposing the death penalty on an American citizen requires more legal process than deporting an illegal alien to their country of origin. And I'm just gonna pause right there because first of all, most of the people deported to El Salvador were not deported to their country of origin. Most of the people deported to El Salvador were Venezuelan. So just immediately throwing that out there. Additionally, the Supreme Court has already ruled, not just on this case in particular, but in past cases, that undocumented immigrants also have a right to due process under the Constitution. This is not if you have time, you give them due process. If you have the resources, you give them due process. We're just doing a little deportation. You don't need to do due process. No, this is every single person who is arrested in the United States of America gets due process. That is how our system works. You are constitutionally guaranteed those rights if you are on American soil. Okay? The idea that, they're not from here, they're not like us, they don't deserve due process is anti-constitutional. This is a man who is going out there and shitting on the Constitution of the American people. This is absolutely antithetical to the ideas and ideals of America. And frankly, any Republican who is waving flags and talks big about constitutional rights and the Second Amendment and all of that, if they are not turning out in the name of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, they do not give a shit about being American. They do not give a shit about the Constitution. They do not give a shit about rights. They do not care about America. They like the aesthetic of America. They like being able to wear like an American flag t-shirt. And I'm sorry, but patriotism runs a little deeper than that. Caring about your country runs a little deeper than that. It is not simply an act. You give a shit about it.
Are you sure we can't violate the 14th Amendment a little, as a treat?
No! No, you can't! Thank you for the $10 dono, though. And, yes, we on the left here, we understand that a lot of people are willing to go along on the Republican side of things with this entire anti-American crusade that they are currently waging against the American people. We understand that. But I'm saying this to make it crystal clear to anyone who may be a conservative who happens across this stream that, this is not a question of, it's a nice thing to do for undocumented immigrants. We just want to be nice to them. Think of the poor undocumented immigrants. Oh, no. You should be empathetic. You should care about others, but that's not what this issue is about. This issue is about what the Constitution says. And the Constitution and the highest court in this land that interprets said Constitution has ruled that you have a right to due process on American soil, regardless of your citizenship status. The Vice President of the United States going out there and saying, oh, well, it's just kind of an optional thing, is a heinous insult to anyone who actually is American. Okay? When the media and far left obsesses over an MS-13 gang member, and I'm going to pause right there again, what's really, really convenient for this administration is that they denied him his constitutional due process with which he could deny being an MS-13 gang member. You cannot claim that this man is an MS-13 gang member when you have not proven that in court and not produced any evidence to that effect. I've looked at the evidence about him being a gang member, and the evidence is people saw him wearing a hoodie, and there's an unnamed informant who said at some point that maybe he was associated with MS-13. And, you know, in a way, he is somewhat associated with MS-13. Specifically, they want to kill him. That's why he had a court order, because he got his day in court back in 2019. And he showed, to the satisfaction of the American legal system, that the reason he should not be sent back to El Salvador is because they would kill him. So, again, I'm just really want to hammer this home. They do not have evidence. It's why they're so desperate to deny him his legal rights. Okay? And demand that he be returned to the United States for a third deportation hearing. What they're really saying is that they want the vast majority of illegal aliens to stay here permanently. And number one, he was here legally. He was here legally. We allowed him to stay. When you say, oh, you want to give him a third deportation hearing, no, because he already had two, and they both decided he could stay. That's what our legal system says. You guys might not like the outcome of the legal system here, but that's what our legal system says. And if we are not a nation of laws, as the right has been so fond of saying for years, then we are a nation of chaos. That the ties that bind us legally no longer matter. The Constitution that binds us all together no longer matters. But I believe that it does matter. And I think most people in America agree with me that the Constitution matters and that our laws matter. Okay? Here's a useful test. Ask the people weeping over the lack of due process what precisely they propose for dealing with Biden's millions and millions of illegals. And with reasonable resources and administrative judge constraints, does their solution allow us to deport at least a few million people per year? And if the answer is no, they've given their game away. They don't want border security. They don't want us to deport the people who've come into our country illegally. They want to accomplish through fake legal process what they failed to accomplish politically. And I'm just going to stop here real quick, okay? Just going to stop because there's so much bullshit here. Number one, what do you mean a fake legal process? If you're asking us what should be done here, the solution is just create legislatively a legal process by which people who are here can become citizens. We make up the laws. We create them with our democratic institutions. So, like, we would simply make laws that would create a process by which people who are here can apply for citizenship. We'd create we'd create a framework for that. That's not that isn't crazy talk. That's just how countries work. Honestly, the incredible statement here from JD Vance just underlies and underscores his absolute abysmal weakness. His weakness of and failure of imagination, failure to innovate in the American context. Like, this is the equivalent of Hakeem Jeffries a few weeks ago going, "Oh, what can we do? We don't have any leverage." Like, what do you mean? You're the vice president of the United States, and you're like, well, there's no possible solution other than sending people to a concentration camp. That's bullshit, and we all know it. We all know it, you know? So the answer here is we already have systems that deport people. That we were deporting people under Joe Biden. We have those until we come up with a better system. Our solution should be provide a pathway to citizenship, massively defund ICE, if not abolish it altogether. That'd be my preference. And then we just take it from there. It would not be hard. Okay? And he's like, if the answer is no, they've given their game away. They don't want border security. They don't want us to deport the people who've come into our country illegally. They want to accomplish through fake legal process what they failed to accomplish politically. The ratification of Biden's illegal migrant invasion. President Trump and I will not stand for it. And again, whether someone is illegal or legal is something we can change bureaucratically. We create these systems. They are socially constructed via our legal processes. And, I'm just a humble country streamer, but I think that America can find a better way to deal with undocumented people than sending them to a foreign concentration camp to be tortured and killed. I think, I think American ingenuity is capable of that. I don't have a high bar here, but I think we can surpass it. And the fact that JD Vance doesn't think America can do better is frankly one of the most one of the strongest indictments of him as a person and a leader. And all I'm saying here is that give them a pathway to citizenship, because really the simplest way of dealing with undocumented people is not spending hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars on deportation efforts and building walls and moats filled with snakes or what have you. It's documenting them. If they're undocumented, give them documents. Not hard. But that's where the current conservative movement is, right? All of that, a whole lot of words to justify sending Kilmar Abrego Garcia, along with hundreds of others, to CCOT, a terrorism confinement center that, if you have spent any amount of time looking at, is a concentration camp. And I'm just gonna show you one picture that I think really underscores exactly when I say it's a concentration camp. I think we'll hammer this home. Okay? That's a fucking concentration camp. Okay? Just they've shaved every single person's head. They have underfed them. They have not provided them with clean water. They are emaciated and scared. They are tortured daily. They are kept in sunless rooms. They are not allowed outside. They are tortured by the guards. They go in indefinitely. Every single person in CCOT is there for as long as the government of El Salvador decides they should be in there. And so far, no one has ever been released. It is unending torment. Okay? That's what this place is. It is I am not kidding. The footage, the videos you can find of the few people who've been allowed to go in here really underscores. There are like hundreds of people in every cell. This is best case. The best case scenario for this is that this is a concentration camp. If we wind up finding out that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is disposed of, it's an extermination camp. Okay? That's like the last escalation left here. It even looks like people from concentration camps. Yeah, because it's a fucking concentration camp. By the end of this, we should have Nuremberg-esque trials for every single person in America that made this happen. Okay? I was, believe it or not, I was talking with my 74-year-old mom earlier today. Even my mom, who's a liberal, who like a year ago was like, why don't leftists like Hillary Clinton? Is like, oh yeah, by the end of this, we're going to need Nuremberg trials. That's where liberals are, guys. That's how bad this is. Okay? Like, I just need to really emphasize this here. Okay? Now, what has happened in the last 48 hours has been nothing short of incredible, right? A number of court orders have gone through. We'll talk about them. But basically, following the point-blank refusal of the Trump administration to even try to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia back home, Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland said he was going to personally go down to El Salvador to meet with Kilmar Abrego Garcia if possible. So we're gonna go through this entire process here, this narrative, but understand that this is not. It's not just Chris Van Hollen. It's a lot of different Democrats are stepping up in order to go down and visit Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and I firmly believe that might be one of the only things that gets him alive home. Here we have Maxwell Frost saying, we must all stand as a united front against the kidnapping and illegal detention of Kilmar Abrego Garcia in El Salvador. Senator, I'm willing to join you and help organize other members of the House to do the same. And this is exactly what is needed. People, at least some number of Democrats are stepping up and doing a very important task. Okay? It is one of the only things that may keep him alive through this. It's a lot harder to disappear someone when sitting senators and representatives in the United States have taken a specific interest in their welfare. Okay? And here we are. We're going to take a look at Chris Van Hollen's journey to El Salvador.
I just landed at the airport in San Salvador a little while ago. I'm now en route into the city. Looking forward to meeting with the team from the American Embassy. And I do want to thank our Foreign Service officers and the whole team at this embassy and embassies around the world for all the good work they do on behalf of our country. I'm proud to co-chair the bipartisan Foreign Service Caucus that stands up for the men and women who are serving our country overseas and at home in the State Department. After that, I hope to meet with some high-level government officials from El Salvador. As I've said before, the goal of my visit is to talk to people here about the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I told his wife and his family I would do everything possible to bring him home, and we're going to keep working at this until we're successful. I also hope to have the chance to meet with him, but we'll have a better idea if that works out a little later on. I just landed at the airport in San Salvador a little while ago. I'm now.
So that's Chris Van Hollen. He went down yesterday to El Salvador. And as you heard, he wanted to meet with high-level officials. He wound up meeting with the vice president of El Salvador. And here is the press conference he had after that. We are going to speed it up a little bit because but his answers are all translated in real time. So we aren't going to spend the full 30 minutes going over this.
What's that?
Can you repeat that? We just started the live stream.
Can we repeat what?
Just start from the top.
Okay. I'm going to start again with. So I just met with the vice president of El Salvador. I'm grateful for the meeting. The president is out of the country at this time. So I appreciated the chance to talk to the vice president about the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Esta mañana estuve platicando con el vicepresidente de la República, el señor Ulloa. Estuvimos y aprecio muchísimo el hecho de que me haya recibido porque el presidente está fuera del país en este momento. Y estuvimos de acuerdo en que vamos a hablar sobre el caso de Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
And we started the conversation on a point of agreement, which is that our two countries should work together to crack down on transnational gangs like MS-13.
Comenzamos en un punto de acuerdo en que ambos países debemos trabajar juntos para poder romper con el régimen transnacional como
And I told the vice president that for over 2 decades, I have worked in my state of Maryland to crack down on MS-13.
Y yo le comentaba al señor vicepresidente que durante los últimos 20 años he estado trabajando para poder acabar con la pandilla del MS-13.
And look forward to further efforts to make sure that we crack down on violent gangs.
Y estamos haciendo todo lo que es posible para terminar con las pandillas violentas.
I think that's important to underscore because the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia does not have to do with MS-13.
Y creo que es muy importante que nosotros establezcamos esto porque el caso de Kilmar Abrego Garcia no tiene que ver con esto.
If you listen to President Trump and the Trump administration, you would think that the U.S. courts have found that Mr. Abrego Garcia is part of MS-13, but in fact, they have not found that. In fact, recently, a U.S. federal court judge said that the Trump administration did not have evidence to support the claim that he had ever been part of MS-13.
Así que si ustedes escuchan al señor Trump, pareciera que están diciendo que el señor Abrego Garcia sí es parte de la pandilla de MS-13, pero sin embargo, el juez federal de nuestro país ha confirmado que el señor Abrego Garcia no forma parte de la pandilla.
In fact, Mr. Abrego Garcia is legally in the United States.
De hecho, el señor Abrego Garcia está legalmente en los Estados Unidos.
In fact, an immigration judge found years ago that it would put his life in danger if he was returned to El Salvador.
De hecho, un juez de inmigración encontró hace varios años que su vida sería en peligro si él retornara de nuevo a El Salvador.
And so he was given protective status and a work permit.
Entonces se le dio a él un estatus de refugiado también para poder trabajar en los Estados Unidos.
And by the way, that was done during the last Trump administration, the last time President Trump was in office, and they never appealed that decision.
Y todo esto sucedió cuando el presidente Trump era presidente anteriormente y nunca apelaron a esa decisión.
So I want to emphasize that President Trump and our Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Vice President of the United States are lying when they say that Abrego Garcia has been charged with a crime or is part of MS-13. That is a lie.
Así que quiero hacer constar que tanto el presidente como el vicepresidente están mintiendo cuando dicen que Abrego García ha sido acusado de ser miembro de la
And this is a lie to cover up what they did. So what did they do?
Y esa es una mentira para poder cubrir lo que ellos hicieron.
So they illegally abducted Mr. Abrego Garcia from Maryland and sent him to CICOT, which is a notorious prison here in El Salvador.
Ellos lo que hicieron fue extraer al señor Abrego García de Maryland, de los Estados Unidos, y lo trasladaron a una prisión. Es una prisión.
In fact, it's a prison where they say they send the worst of the worst, right? That's where they send the terrorists. Now, the courts of the United States have said there's no evidence to support the charge that he's part of MS-13. So I asked the vice president whether or not El Salvador has any evidence that he's part of MS-13 or has committed a crime.
Así que en las cortes de los Estados Unidos no existe ninguna evidencia que diga que el señor Abrego García fue miembro de la MS-13. Así que la pregunta que le hice yo esta mañana el vicepresidente vio esto y El Salvador tiene pruebas de que el señor Abrego García sí.
So I asked the vice president if Abrego Garcia has not committed a crime, and the U.S. courts have found that he was illegally taken from the United States, and the government of El Salvador has no evidence that he was part of MS-13. Why is El Salvador continuing to hold him in CICOT?
Entonces, si no hay pruebas contra el señor Abrego García de que se introdujo ilegalmente en los Estados Unidos o que él sea miembro de la MS-13, porque en las cortes de los Estados Unidos no hay evidencia, entonces, ¿por qué es que lo liberan?
And his answer was that the Trump administration is paying El Salvador, the government of El Salvador, to keep him at CICOT.
Now, I'm going to say right here, right now, that bit of information, along with keeping Kilmar Abrego Garcia alive, that bit of information is one of the most important things that could have been gained by this trip. Specifically because what that means is there is an agreement, and like we've known this because of leaks, but what this enters into the public record is a senator who now has some confirmation of that agreement. And what that means is we are paying, it is confirmation that we are paying, the United States is paying to maintain Kilmar Abrego Garcia's imprisonment. And if we are paying to maintain it, then we can pay to end it. We can stop his imprisonment, okay? That's very, very important, all right? Isn't maintaining kind of the opposite of facilitating? Yes, and that's going to have very big implications for later on. So, what happened after Chris Van Hollen met here with the vice president, did this press conference? He attempted to go and visit CICOT. Okay? And El Salvador refused to allow him to meet Kilmar Abrego Garcia or even visit the prison. Okay, this is wild stuff. So, he was denied a meeting with Abrego Garcia. The Salvadoran officials would not let the senator or Abrego Garcia's family speak with him by phone. El Salvador has recently allowed Republican members of Congress inside CICOT, as well as Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who was filmed in front of a row of men crowded behind bars. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, they allowed other members of Congress to visit? Yeah, they did. Other Republicans are using this as like a disgusting PR display. Thanks to President Trump, the CICOT prison in El Salvador, which is home to some of the country's most vicious criminals, now includes illegal immigrants who broke into our country and committed violent acts against Americans. It's unconscionable that Democrats in Congress are urging the release of more foreign criminals back into our country. And I'm just going to respond that in a way that doesn't violate TOS. Every single one of these fuckers who goes and uses these people as a prop to show how tough they are is indistinguishable from Goebbels, indistinguishable from the PR arm of the Nazi party going around and vilifying people in the camps in order to justify their extermination. This is what is happening. These people are justifying the extermination of our constitutional rights in America. And if we allow that to happen, what that means is they are then allowed to exterminate not just our rights, but us. Okay? That is what this is. They want this to happen so that they can just disappear people into furnaces in El Salvador. And I am not being hyperbolic here. People die frequently in El Salvador's prisons. It is not a stretch that they would build facilities that would dispose of undesirables here. Okay? We also have Representative Riley M. Moore. I just toured the CCOT prison in El Salvador today. The maximum security facility houses the country's most brutal criminals, including murderers, rapists, pedophiles, and terrorists. Several inmates were extremely violent criminals recently deported from the U.S. I leave now even more determined to support President Trump's efforts to secure the homeland. And I just really have to emphasize, none of the people who were deported to El Salvador, well, 90% of them, at the very least, had not received their due process. There's at least one case, everyone's heard of the gay hairdresser who got deported, or the guy who had an autism awareness tattoo for his younger brother, but like there are others too, like an unnamed teenager who, when ICE detained him, just said, "That's not the one." And then another ICE officer said, whatever, bring him in anyway. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know how you see this type of facility and think, yes, this is good. We need more of this. We need to subject not just undocumented people, not just people who are in the United States legally, but we also need to subject U.S. citizens to this. Because, hey, this all happened after Donald Trump said we need to send U.S. citizens to facilities like this. Let's build 5 more of them in El Salvador. Okay? Disgusting. Anti-American. And frankly, I'm just going to say it. Every single person who is supporting this policy is a traitor to the American Republic. A traitor to the very idea of America. As traitorous as someone donning a red coat during the Revolution. People who are going down there posing for photos, people who are going down there to justify this detainment, this trampling of our rights, they are traitors. The people imposing this upon those folks who came here for a better life, they are traitors. Traitors to the ideal on the Statue of Liberty, traitors to the very existence of the Liberty Bell.
Camps were in Poland and not Germany.
Yep. If you look up the definition of a concentration camp on any of the Holocaust museum resources, it will tell you that it is what differentiates a concentration camp from a prison is that it is a prison outside of the law, for which due process is not a thing. People are just snatched and then they are sent there to rot, and conditions are not maintained by any kind of legal authority. Okay? So, let's continue here. Because all of this yesterday triggered a flood of folks in the Democratic Party. And you know what? My hat's off to them. They recognize the moment and they are trying to do something about it. Every single one of these people understands the existential stakes for this country if Kilmar Abrego Garcia is allowed to disappear into CCOT. Okay? So, what we're at here is where we're at here. It's not just about one deportee or even immigration policy, lawmakers say. This is about a president of the United States defying the Supreme Court and wanting to be a king, said Representative Robert Garcia, Democrat of California. Garcia and Representative Maxwell Frost are trying to secure GOP authorization to lead a congressional delegation to visit deportees at El Salvador's Centro de Confinamiento del Terrorismo, CCOT, Axios first reported Tuesday. Senator Chris Van Hollen went. Senator Cory Booker is planning a trip. People are stepping up. And I, for one, am very supportive of every single person who can make it down there. It needs to become like, hey, when are you going down there? Because we all expect it. It needs to become a normalized, expectant thing until this crisis is resolved. Okay? Now, we have one very, very, very important breaking update as of an hour and a half ago. Senator Chris Van Hollen diligently continued to try to contact Kilmar Abrego Garcia and was finally allowed to meet with him. He is, in fact, alive. And hopefully he will stay that way thanks to the interest and the protection of various Democratic representatives and senators who are going down there, okay? Let's take a look. I have not looked at this part yet. This just happened right before stream. Okay? I said my main goal of this trip was to meet with Kilmar. Tonight I had that chance. I have called his wife, Jennifer, to pass along his message of love. I look forward to providing a full update upon my return. And this is a picture of him with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Fuck. I'm really, really glad. I'm really, really glad because I know a lot of people, not just me, were incredibly worried about his well-being, his safety, and his ability to persist. Note, this is staged propaganda. Note the creases on the shirt, the newness of the hat, etc. Oh, absolutely. They do not allow prisoners to wear hats or to wear clothing in the prison. Like, the actual conditions of the prison, I need to remind you, are this. Okay, they don't have heat or air conditioning in this prison. That's like they don't give anyone shirts. Okay? So, yes, is this staged? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I imagine what happened is that Chris Van Hollen persisted in his requests, and the government of El Salvador relented and took Kilmar Abrego Garcia out of prison and dusted him off, gave him new clothes, and sent him out to have this very, I presume, carefully staged intervention. Because I'm going to tell you this right now, there's no way CCOT, from anything I have seen, has like nice glassware or dining tables, okay? I do not believe that for a goddamn second. I mean, like, and you can even like look at his eyes. Dude looks haunted as hell. I hope they didn't beat him up after this. Unfortunately, Sassy Sasser, I'd love to say that they wouldn't do that, and maybe they won't, simply because people know that like he's being watched and cared for, like, by people outside of the prison. But like, from a lot of the accounts from inside the prison that have filtered into the outside world, it is grim in there. He looks like he lost weight. Almost certainly. They do not feed these people enough to like survive. Yeah, I'm not going to put too much stock in Google Maps until we get firsthand accounts. Given that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is alive and was allowed to meet with Chris Van Hollen, I think we will hear a lot more about the conditions in there from Chris Van Hollen, and also from when we bring him home.
Arrive.
Hey, Entramo, welcome. Thank you for 53 months being subscribed. You're a real trooper. Thanks for being with me the entire time, friendo. Hope you're doing all right. I don't know. It's a question. What? Yeah, exactly. When we get him home. We cannot by the way, again, and I need to emphasize this enough, it cannot be that we simply allow this to happen. This is not, this is, the Trump administration has planted their flag and we are pushing against it, and we cannot simply say, oh, okay, well, this is fine. There are a lot of things people can tolerate. This is not one that we can tolerate. If we tolerate this, if this is allowed to stand, we don't have rights. There's no longer an expectation anytime you're brought into a courtroom that anything that happens in there matters. Okay? Oh, I think Chris Van Hollen will be very chatty about what he's seen. I disagree. I think the more information that is public, and keep in mind, it will become public given that he is likely to be called upon to testify in the ongoing legal proceedings. Okay? I was asking why the senator went along with the stage meeting with Kilmar, because the alternative was not being able to meet with Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Dropping 5 bills to remind chat that none of this is fine.
Like that's the like if they offer to bring him out of a prison to meet with you, a prison that no one else has ever emerged from alive, you take that opportunity. And honestly, being able to verify that he's alive in and of itself is very important information. The most important parts of this trip, like we got so much out of this. And honestly, in my book, I'm going to remember Chris Van Hollen as some kind of hero. Like, whatever other flaws he may have as a senator, whatever flaws, whatever other horrible shit he might do, this alone means a lot. And I think it means a lot to others who are trapped in that prison, who do not want, their story to be told because they fear being murdered behind bars. I think it means a lot to every single American who values their constitutional rights. I think it matters to every single undocumented immigrant. The consequences and wide-reaching ramifications of this are not just for Kilmar Abrego Garcia. It is for every single one of us. Okay? Also, the fact that a senator is able to achieve this meeting makes the government look pathetic when it says we can't do anything to get him out. Exactly. Exactly, Paul Hammond in YouTube chat. Exactly. If this guy can get him out from behind bars at CCOT even for a temporary meeting, the president of the United States sure as shit should be able to get him home.
Fascism never changes. If you tolerate this, then your children will be next.
Unironically, not hyperbolic. Okay? No other Democrat did anything. At least he took himself down there. Yeah, and he's the first. And other Democrats are going to follow to maintain wellness checks on Kilmar. And hopefully we'll bring him home soon. Because it is very likely that for at least another couple weeks, as discovery goes on in the Judge Zenas case, and the contempt process rolls on in Judge Boasberg's courtroom, this is going to take a bit. The courts are moving basically as fast as they can in the United States here. But that's still going to mean like weeks, if not months, of him in there. Can we bring them all home? Well, that's part of the reason why this is important, right? Because if we can bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia home, It means they have to bring all of the rest of them home. It means they all have to be given their due process. They have to come here. So if we get him out, we get them all out. That's why this is important. And not only do we get them out, we get all of us potentially out in the future. You know, like we prevent people from being sent there going forward. In this way, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is both a man, a victim, and also the key for the freedom of every single other person whose rights have been violated to throw them in that concentration camp. And when this is all said and done, we should continue to organize and continue to grow our protests to get every single person in CCOT out, to end CCOT. Frankly, the fact that CCOT exists at all and the conditions in there are allowed at all. El Salvador is a satellite state to the United States. And whatever influence we have over El Salvador, we should use to ensure that a site like CCOT cannot exist. That the leadership in El Salvador cannot be allowed to run a concentration camp for profit. No fucking concentration camps here. Sadly, the others weren't lucky enough to have the Trump administration admit to their fuck up, and they won't make that mistake again. No, that's not the issue. The issue is in this case that even though the Trump administration admitted to the fuck up, the judges have already ruled that they need due process. Every single one of those people had their due process rights ignored. That is not acceptable. What helped facilitate Kilmar's case, was the admission of the mistake. However, the other aspects of this case, the destruction of due process, that remains a constant in all of those cases. When we beat these fucks, we need the USA to join the ICC. That would be one of the most glorious days in American history. Now, let's turn our attention here to the court cases around this, okay? Because as important as the actual, verifying that he's alive, all of that, the most important, you know? But what is happening legally around this is just as important, okay? So we turn now to Law Dork here with Chris Geidner. Judge finds probable cause. The Trump administration is in contempt over March 15th flights. In Chief Judge Boasberg's opinion in the Alien Enemies Act case, his next steps include possible prosecution of Trump officials by a court-appointed attorney. And this is one of the things, right? A lot of really interesting legal maneuvers are happening right now, okay? First, 2 days ago, we had Judge Sines, sorry, I've been pronouncing it wrong, trying to correct my pronunciation. Judge Sines ruled that essentially there was going to be an expedited period of discovery over the course of 2 weeks. Basically, everyone who signed a document alleging different facts about Kilmar Abrego Garcia would be deposed, with Kilmar Abrego Garcia's lawyers being able to call others higher up to be deposed as well, get them under oath on those depositions. If they lie, they're going to be in deep shit, okay? And anyone who tries to stonewall this is going to be subject to what is called civil contempt, okay? And that is basically where, under civil contempt, it is not pardonable because it is civil in nature, but judges have a bit of leeway when it comes to civil contempt. For example, what judges can do is they can impose escalating fines. Like, you will owe a fine of $100 that will double every single day you refuse to testify. You know, that's the kind of like coercion to force testimony a judge can do when it comes to civil contempt. Another way a judge can do this is by imposing prison or jail time. If, for example, the government's lawyer refuses to cooperate, the judge can say, okay, you're going to spend the night in lockup, and you're going to continue to spend nights in lockup until you decide to actually do your job. People start going to prison, okay? And that's really interesting. That is, of course, a very interesting development. And who knows? We'll know in about 2 weeks when, like, I think March 28th, I think, is the date of her next court hearing. That's when we're next going to get updates on that particular case. Can't they also freeze assets? They can do a lot of things. The judges have a lot of leeway. Was the 9-0 SCOTUS vote against or in favor of Trump's proposal? And what proposal was it? The 9-0 SCOTUS decision was basically reaffirming Judge Sini's order, which is that the Trump administration has to bring Abrego Garcia home. That's why she is pursuing these civil discovery processes to get more information on the record, so that inevitably, when it goes to the Supreme Court, the government's lawyers have less wiggle room with the facts. That's essentially what's happening. Okay, in that case, anyway, with Judge Boasberg, what's happening here is on a couple of different fronts, right? Because Judge Boasberg is dealing with challenges to the Alien Enemies Act, the power that was used to deport these Venezuelans and MS-13, alleged MS-13 gang members to El Salvador. That was all done under the AEA, the Alien Enemies Act, right? Did I say March? I meant April 28th. Sorry. I think I saw something, Republicans on conservative subreddit saying it was 9-0 the other way. Yeah, that's because Republicans have been lying in the media. The actual decision reaffirmed Judge Sini's and the order to bring Abrego Garcia home. Stephen Miller has been doing a lot of interviews lying about the Supreme Court's order, and that is probably not going to serve the Trump administration very well once this goes back in front of the Supreme Court, which, again, it is going to. And when we go to Judge Boasberg, remember that Judge Boasberg was the one who said, hey, you cannot deport people to Venezuela, to El Salvador. You have to turn those planes around. You have to bring them back. You have to give them due process. Even if those planes are in the air, you bring them back. And what has now been established to his satisfaction is that his orders, both verbal and written, were ignored, which is why he is now going for criminal contempt. So criminal contempt is a different kind of beast from civil contempt. And also very interesting here is that if he does go with criminal contempt, usually what would happen in this case would be that a federal judge going after criminal contempt would have the Department of Justice then prosecute that person for criminal contempt. However, for obvious reasons, Judge Boasberg cannot depend on the Department of Justice to actually prosecute anyone being held in criminal contempt by his particular court. So he has to appoint and will appoint, if he deems it necessary, an attorney to prosecute this. yes, criminal contempt can be pardoned. However, again, it is good then that we have two different judges approaching this in two different directions at the same time. Because it gives the Trump administration one last out, one last opportunity to kind of back down here before they put themselves in a position to go to jail. And well, we'll take a look at this real quick. Again, from Chris Geidner here. Chief Judge James Boasberg has found probable cause that the Trump administration should be held in contempt because it willfully disobeyed his Saturday, March 15th orders that the administration not deport people under President Donald Trump's Alien Enemies Act proclamation, while a case challenging the proclamation could proceed. From the opening hours of Saturday, the government's conduct betrayed a desire to outrun the equitable reach of the judiciary, Boasberg wrote in his 46-page opinion. With Wednesday's ruling, however, Boasberg asserted that the judicial branch must assert its place to hold the executive branch accountable when that outrunning crosses the line into disobeying a judicial order. So basically, kind of what we were talking about the other day, right? Which is that the Trump administration has been outrunning the courts, i.e., moving faster than what the courts can keep up with. However, Judge Boasberg is basically saying, y'all can't do that anymore. We caught up to you. Okay? Hold up, it was 46 pages. Yeah, the federal judges, man, they're comprehensive. Now, what we have here with this case is that Judge Boasberg has given the government one last out. Essentially, they have two choices. They can either purge contempt, which is essentially where they go, oh, our bad, we'll comply with the order now and bring all of those people home. And then that basically means that the criminal contempt charge goes away. However, that would also mean that the Trump administration would then have to basically say, yeah, actually, we do have custody of all those people in El Salvador, which, for obvious reasons, would have wide-ranging implications for other current cases that are ongoing. Okay? And that would also probably mean that a lot of people in the Trump administration committed perjury. Okay? So, and I'm just going to quote here from Chris Geidner, if the Trump administration does not do so, however, Boasberg's set forth next steps that would include identifying who in the administration should be held in contempt, requesting prosecution by the government, and, if needed, appointing an attorney to do so. And the administration has until April 23rd to decide which path it's going to take. And I'm going to read the final version of the order. Given the finding of probable cause for contempt set forth in the accompanying memorandum opinion, the court orders that if defendants opt to purge their contempt, they shall file by April 23rd, 2025, a declaration explaining the steps they have taken and will take to do so. And 2, if defendants opt to not purge their contempt, they shall instead file by April 23rd declarations identifying the individuals who, with knowledge of the court's class-wide temporary restraining order, made the decision not to halt the transfer of class members out of U.S. custody on March 15th and 16th, 2025, signed James E. Boasberg. So that's where we're at, okay? Basically, within the next 6 to 11 days, we're going to find out what's going to happen. Because we're on a course here for the Trump administration to just say, no, we're not going to listen to that. We're not going to listen to that. And if that's the case, we get into completely unknown territory. You know? It is worth noting that both Boasberg and Sines seem pretty aware of their position in history. I think Boasberg has tried repeatedly to avoid being in this position, but his conduct yesterday kind of shows that he's accepted that he's going to be the guy. You know, like basically he did not want to be the guy who is angling the United States judiciary on a collision course with the Trump administration, or rather, he did not want to be the point of contact at which the Trump administration collided with the judiciary. That's probably a better way of putting it. So it is, it's unfortunate. And like the Supreme Court on the Alien Enemies Act, by the way, did find that, like, you know, these people are entitled to due process, and due process in this case for undocumented immigrants means habeas petitions to the court. However, that does not change the violation of his temporary restraining order. It does not change the fact that these people have to be brought back. It does not change those facts. Okay? His order was interesting since it was overturned for venue. That's also true, because when you're talking about contempt, it doesn't matter if, like, the initial judge's order is wrong. You still have to comply with the judge's order until you appeal. You know? Yeah, I never wanted to be that chick, but if you force my hand, I will be that chick. I get the feeling. Yeah. It's, I mean, like, we also have the Justice Department has been trying to argue this case, and it's not going well for them. And I think they have succeeded in pissing off basically every single major judge in the U.S. government. Like, I think that they are genuinely running out of any kind of ability to argue their cases. The last venue they may have is in front of the Supreme Court, but even the Supreme Court is tired of this shit. And in response to the appeal to, I believe, Judge Boasberg, well, it's other judges are not having it. If today the executive claims the right to deport without due process and to disregard of court orders, what assurance will there be that tomorrow it will not deport American citizens and then disclaim responsibility to bring them home? This is the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. This is Judge Wilkinson giving his ruling. We yet cling to the hope that it is not naive to believe our good brethren in the executive branch perceive the rule of law as vital to the American ethos. And basically the appeal happened yesterday. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals responded today, 8 hours ago. And I need you all to understand that is basically the fastest response I've ever seen a court do. Okay? So that is very, very interesting. Okay? They seem to understand the assignment. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, we've got a lot to talk about here because these cases are wild. They're also trying to appeal Judge Sines, and that does not seem to be flying either. So it's it's a lot is happening here. And I don't really know where this goes from here. But I will say that it is worth noting that several other jurisdictions have now put out temporary restraining orders against deportations under the Alien Enemies Act, following in the footsteps of many of these other courtrooms and court battles that we've been talking about. Okay? Wilkinson is a Reagan judge. He's been on the bench for over 4 decades. Holy moly. His son was Trump's Solicitor General? He clerked under Lewis Powell? Yeah, okay. They've lost, like, the most conservative judges who aren't just, like, Trump sycophants. That's crazy. Now, of course, this continues, okay? And as I've seen you all ask, what happens if a president and the federal government fail to follow a judge's orders? Because that's worth thinking about now, unfortunately. So, let's take a look. Ba-ba-ba-ba. Criminal contempt, which is what Boasberg is considering, usually requires charges by the Justice Department, which the president oversees. A president can void criminal contempt by issuing a pardon. But Boasberg said that if the government refuses to prosecute, he would appoint an attorney himself who would carry out that function, as has happened in other cases. In one recent example, a judge in New York appointed lawyers to prosecute Stephen Donziger, an environmental lawyer who was convicted of contempt in 2021 for defying orders related to a lawsuit he spearheaded over oil pollution in Ecuador. One complication for Boasberg is that in Donziger's case, the private lawyers were still subject to supervision by the U.S. Attorney General. Another option is a process known as civil contempt that involves a judge issuing an order holding either the government writ large or an officer of the government in contempt. The judge could impose daily fines or even order someone jailed until the contempt is purged. Civil contempt is not pardonable. Judges are generally reluctant to hold the U.S. government litigants in contempt, but they have done so. Okay, and I'm just going to pause here by saying, if Boasberg is forcing the government's hand to do like a pardon scheme here, like with Donald Trump just pardoning people who are being held guilty of contempt or held in contempt, that comes at a political cost. Okay, understand that that is not something that is done in a vacuum. Okay? So Judge Boasberg is kind of doing a number of different things here. One, if they do comply, great. People are going to be probably guilty of some perjury, etc., etc., etc. If they don't comply, then contempt proceeds. However, if they then pardon, well, we have a really big point of information, don't we? As people organizing against this administration, we have a great thing to point to say, this is why we all need to get out on the streets. This is why we are getting out as much as possible. This is why we're getting loud. This is why we need to do this. Okay? And meanwhile, we still have the civil contempt proceedings. Also, I'm not sure if pardoning the criminal contempt means he cannot then bring civil contempt proceedings to bear. So there are a lot of questions here. Andrew S., thank you for the $5 dono.
WTH, I just saw an opinion piece by David Brooks calling for a general strike, and Bill Kristol supports the abolition of ICE? Just less than 3 months.
Yeah, look, again, this is why we call it the cool zone, because a lot of wacky things start happening, okay? We're seeing Republicans, like actual goddamn Republicans like Bill Kristol, calling for abolishing ICE. And I also was going to bring up later, David Brooks wrote a piece. I'll just throw it up real quick if I have it handy. Yeah. David Brooks ended his piece by saying, I'm really not a movement guy. I don't naturally march in demonstrations or around rallies that I'm not covering as a journalist. But this is what America needs right now. Trump is shackling the greatest institutions in American life. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Do you have any idea what it takes for David fucking Brooks to quote the Communist Manifesto? We're talking like fucking ding dongs doing this now, guys. Just anecdotally here, my mom and I were talking today, and she was talking about all of her friends who are like in their 70s have been going out to protests. Like every single one of them. You know? And like, something is happening here, and I know it feels like it's taking too long, but in the span of 3 months, people who have never protested in their lives are getting out on the streets. Okay? Like, something is happening, and if we keep amping up the pressure, if Donald Trump pardons someone in the name of keeping people in concentration camps in El Salvador? No. Something is going to break. The whatever conservative levies keep people in check are not going to work anymore. But King Ding Dong is in charge of the military. Ah, yes, the military that he is also fucking over. Like every single person down the chain of command, like who wasn't personally installed by Donald Trump's sycophants, they hate him. Like people in the military, they don't like that they're purging books from their children's schools about slavery or the Holocaust. There's something incredibly basic happening that they can recognize. Okay? And every single one of them hates Pete Hegseth. Okay? I do not think this president giving orders to fire upon a gigantic protest of like elderly people and children, I don't think that is going to fly, guys. I don't think that's going to fly. I don't think the military is going to do that. Okay? So, yeah, we're in some wacky times here. And it's also worth noting that we are right now in the best time to oppose this administration, largely because this piece in The Atlantic should be worrying. This is why we need to do something about all of this now, and we need to continue mobilizing through the fall. Okay? By this fall, we need to have even larger protests going. Specifically because Congress is going to be voting on a budget. Congress is going to be voting on a budget. Now, does anyone want to take a stab at what the budget of ICE is right now? Too damn high? Well, true, but I'm talking numbers. 100? 3 trillion? 4.5 billion? 6 billion? 1 million? A zillion dollars? Jess is correct. The current budget of ICE is $6 billion. The budget that Congress wants to give to ICE in this next budget bill is somewhere around $175 billion. And what we need to do is we need to continue mobilizing so that we stop that budget. We need to stop that budget. We need to make it clear that is unacceptable. How much are they saving? They're not saving anything. They're actually spending more. But if this is allowed to go through next year, the amount of money and the amount of force that ICE can bring to bear is going to be multiplied exponentially. And that should worry basically everyone, considering what ICE is trying to do right now. Okay? And I'm not just talking about like deportations to El Salvador concentration camps, like, which is already terrifying as hell. But I'm talking about like their current activities, which are escalating in intensity. Here is a story from the AP. A Venezuelan man was tackled in a New Hampshire courthouse and sent by ICE to Texas. And we actually have video here. Look at this. You have sound? No sound. You have all these people coming in. By the way, they're coming inside of a courthouse to someone who had a court date. They absolutely destroy this old man in the process while trying to violently detain this guy in the middle of a courthouse. Not a single one of them, by the way, moving to help that man that they knocked over. The man they arrested was Arnuel Marquez Colmenares. And he was charged with drunk driving and driving without a license and failing to provide information after an accident. He was heading to his arraignment on those charges when he was apprehended. So basically, they arrested him while he was trying to go to court to make things right about that. Honestly, and I do mean this, I think every single person who works as an agent for ICE should be included in whatever Nuremberg-esque trials happen after all this. Every single one of these motherfuckers. They, like... And you might think, oh, but Jack, that's too extreme. That's way too extreme. Can we get this? I have the footage here. Yes, here we go. Here we have the story of a Guatemalan man who is 29 years old. He was driving with his family. His car was stopped by ICE officials, and they called their lawyer. They refused to open their doors, which is what you should do. And they called their lawyer. His lawyer was on his way. He had to wait for 30 minutes. And so they just like, we're not going to open our doors. You can detain us for 30 minutes. We're going to stay in the car. You know, I have my kids in here. You guys can talk to my lawyer. And this is what ICE did during this.
Golly.
can't reach it. It's up by her. Here you go.
No esperaron a que la abogada se presentara, que llegara acá con nosotros y rompieron el vidrio.
You know, people who are operating within the law typically don't try and dodge lawyers by breaking windows and abducting people in broad daylight. Again, I don't know how you sleep at night if you're one of these guys who breaks into a car with like an ice shovel in broad daylight to abduct a father. I don't know. I don't know how you live with yourself, honestly. And frankly, if anyone has friends who are in ICE, shame them relentlessly. You know, like if you know anyone in ICE, fucking mock them to their faces. Denigrate them and their service. They're fucking monsters. This isn't effing legal, is it? No. It's not legal to break into someone's car if you don't have a warrant. You know? If you have a warrant, you'd be justified in breaking into a car. If you don't have a warrant, you aren't allowed to break through the windows of someone's car. That's illegal as hell. They think they can get away with it because this person may or may not be undocumented. They think they can get away with it because they view him as inherently less valuable than someone who's white and a citizen. Okay? This is extrajudicial kidnapping. This is brown shirt Gestapo shit.
Y eso no, no, nosotros también tenemos derecho.
We have rights to be here too.
De estar acá y entonces lo que hicieron fue injustamente.
What they did was unfair.
Se llevaron a mi esposo sin que la abogada.
They took my husband without the lawyer being present. My lawyer is on her way. I just want to talk, just talk. But I will only speak once my lawyer arrives. They can't force the door, they can't break the glass. They can't do anything, we're recording them. Tell the lawyer to hurry. What a disgusting crew of miscreants. Again, we have their faces this time. This man, like, no joke, this man should personally be prosecuted for this. This man should go to jail for this. He broke the law to kidnap someone extrajudicially. Fascist trash. Ask if they have a warrant.
Orden de detención. Pero, disculpe, ¿tiene una orden? ¿Tienen una orden? ¿Me puede oír? Que si tienen una orden de detención. ¿Una orden, no?
Pues sí, una orden.
No.
Fuck no. We just want to talk. That's why I'm wearing a combat vest. To harass you and your children. Keep in mind, the children were in the car. Children were in this car.
Sí.
Do you want it hard or easy?
Pero cuando está
you know, the kind of thing someone says when they just want to talk to you. Do you want it hard or easy?
presente mi abogada. Lo van a quebrar.
Ah, lo van a quebrar ya ahorita, dice.
They say they'll break it.
Okay. Okay, voy a grabar
I'll record a
por si
video in
acaso
case that
sucede.
happens.
Okay, gracias.
Ah, bueno, que lo haga.
Well, they're going to do it now.
Déjalo ahí.
I can't reach it. It's up by her. Here you go.
Horrifying fascist goons.
A mí y a mi esposo.
They removed me and my
Nos jalaron
husband.
duro.
They pulled me out of the car violently.
Nos jalaron. Y
Or maybe there
mi
wasn't
esposo
children
también
in
lo
the car. That's
trataron-
my bad.
lo trataron
They treated my
feo.
husband very
Me lo
badly.
jalaron
They treated me
feo a él, a
badly
mí
too.
también.
Bueno, yo tengo que ver por mi cliente.
Now I have to figure out how to
tengo que ver
proceed with my
cómo
client.
Hago, más que seguro, lo
He'll
van a
most likely
poner
be
en un
placed before an
proceso
immigration court.
enfrente de la Corte de Inmigración, van a tener que pagar
He'll have to pay a
fianza
bond in
para
order
que
to
le
be
den de
released.
alta. El señor va a pasar unos
He'll probably have to
días
spend a few days in
la
jail
cárcel, por la manera brutal
because of the
en
brutal
cual
way they
ellos lo
treated him.
trataron. So, están actuando con impunidad. Y
They're
saben que
acting
ellos
with complete
pueden hacer
impunity. They
hasta
know they
romper
can
un
even break a
vidrio
car
mientras
window
personas
while
están
people are
dentro
still
del
inside.
carro. Imagínate
Can
si
you
hubiese
imagine if
habido
there were
niños
children in the
en el
car?
carro.
I can. That's what I thought was happening.
Es lo
It's
más
the most vulgar and brutal
vulgar,
thing I've ever
más
seen.
Me da vergüenza
I'm ashamed of what this country has become.
este país, lo que se ha convertido. Es una pena.
Truly a shame. And yeah, that is disgusting in the extreme. And it does not end there. Because again, remember what I said about ICE getting like 170 billion more dollars in funding potentially? Well, this is a story I was alerted to yesterday by a kind chatter. And this should, I think, be incredibly worrying for basically anyone who does work in California or Texas, especially if you are undocumented, especially if you take money under the table for your labor. Money services in some California and Texas areas required to do additional reporting under new order. So what does that mean? That's very like oddly nebulous, right? Let's take a look. All money service businesses in 30 zip codes across California and Texas, including 7 in San Diego County, are now required to report transactions of at least $200 under a recent federal order. Now, typically, what needs to be reported to the federal government are transactions over $10,000. This is to prevent things like money laundering, right? However, this, which is called a geographic targeting order, issued by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, under the U.S. Department of the Treasury, and it officially went into effect on Monday. So basically, in these 30 zip codes, and I'm going to take a wild guess, because when you know it, when asked why these 30 zip codes, no answer was forthcoming. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that they are going after undocumented immigrants who are being paid under the table. Okay? That's what's happening. Yes, that was Harry Puddles over in YouTube chat. Thank you very much for bringing this to my attention, because it's very scary. You know, one of the biggest ways undocumented immigrants make their income is under the table payments. This is specifically designed in order to target those under the table payments. And again, 30 different zip codes. Existing law already requires financial institutions to report transactions over $10,000 or multiple currency transactions that total at least that amount in a single day. The currency transaction reports are meant to combat threats such as money laundering or other financial crimes. The order applies to money services businesses in the following zip codes in San Diego County: 91910, 92101, 92113, 92117, 92126, 92154 and 92173. This includes neighborhoods along the southern border, such as San Ysidro and Otay Mesa, as well as Barrio Logan, Logan Heights, Chula Vista, Claremont, and Mira Mesa. Meanwhile, businesses in 4 zip codes in Imperial County, 92231, 92249, 92281, and 92283, are also subject to the new order in addition to zip codes in 5 Texas counties. The 5 counties in Texas affected by the order are Cameron, El Paso, Hidalgo, Maverick, and Webb. To see a full list of the zip codes and subject to the GTO, click here. I'm just going to copy and link that in chat for you guys. Yeah. They're tracking the 1099s. And 1099s are issued for every transaction over 600. They're going even after the smaller ones, though. You know? According to the federal agency, the order was issued to prevent people associated with foreign drug cartels from accessing the U.S. financial system. And we all know that when they say people with foreign drug cartel ties, we know that they're talking about undocumented immigrants. They're not talking about people with drug ties. That's just not what they're doing. All of this is coming after an executive order signed by Donald Trump to designate these different cartels as terrorist organizations. It's all being done to crack down on undocumented immigrants. But they can't be honest about it because that would be bad. They wouldn't be able to get away with it. You know? This is any check cashed over $200, any money order bought with cash, any prepaid card load, any money transfer initiated with cash. And I think what really, really makes it clear what they're doing here is that in reporting those large transactions, along with the new lower limit transactions, businesses are required to include a customer's social security number or other tax identification number. And they're planning to go through those social security numbers to find and locate people who are undocumented immigrants. That's what is happening here. That's so bad. I mean, it basically makes it impossible to make a living in those areas if you're undocumented. Okay? But social security numbers mean they're literally documented. Yeah, but sometimes undocumented folks use fake social security numbers. Like they use bogus ones. And that's good enough usually for like paying taxes, for example. Not good enough to like go and vote. Not good enough if you are deliberately looking for those accounts and care about where the money is going and who's making the payments. They'll just stop using banks. I mean, honestly, yeah, it just pushes undocumented immigrants further underground. But like, very bizarre and awful and terrible. Additionally, like, they might be using this to go after potentially documented folks who are here legally, but like they want to paint them as terrorists or people with ties to terrorists. I mean, frankly, this administration is deporting people who are already here legally. It would not be a stretch to say that they would maybe go after green card holders or people on visas who have these social security numbers. But yeah, it's very, very bad. I'm a new viewer, so I have to ask about the purple lightsaber behind you. Oh, they're just lights. I like them. I can make them change different colors. Or maybe I can't. There you go. See? Neat. I like it. And I do have to point out one additional thing, folks, before we finish up this story. And I know it's been 2 hours. I know that this has been a long journey, and maybe we'll have to break this up into multiple segments. But one last thing, and this is from just today. Okay? This is from just today. In Florida, a man from Georgia was arrested and detained by ICE. He's an American citizen. US-born citizen held by ICE in Florida jail despite birth certificate presented in court. State law makes it a crime to enter the state as an unauthorized alien, but it's blocked by a judge, and Juan Carlos Lopez Gomez was born in the United States. A 20-year-old United States citizen was held in Florida at the request of federal immigration authorities, despite his mother showing his birth certificate and social security information to a judge in court. Juan Carlos Lopez Gomez was taken to Leon County Jail after a traffic stop and charged with illegally entering the state as an unauthorized alien under a state law that has been temporarily blocked from enforcement by a federal judge. So just to clarify here, ICE arrested a man and detained and arrested a man for being an unauthorized alien under a law that cannot be enforced.
In the cool zone? Or where are we now other than scared?
The cool zone was never just for good things. It is an increased opportunity window of both good and bad things. So we're getting a lot of wild and weird shit. It's just more fun to call it the cool zone than like the chaos pit. Like it's just, you know, it feels more approachable to call it the cool zone than, you know, the window of increased opportunity for good and evil. You know, like it doesn't really flow off the tongue. Okay. But thank you for the $10 super chat, Chris Huggins. So basically, this is a law. Oh, thank you very much.
Stay strong and protest smart. BWA.
Ashley J. Curtis, thank you for that BWA energy injected into chat. And thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. I appreciate the dickens out of it. Thank you so much for supporting the show. But we have this young man being arrested under a law that is not applicable. It is illegal to enforce that law. And when I talk about how these people need to be charged with crimes, these ICE agents need to be charged with crimes, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Okay? This is exactly what I'm talking about. That guy, like, you hear this phrase in courtrooms a lot, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. In the same way, ignorance of like the law being suspended here should not be an excuse for this ICE agent. They should be arrested. They were trying to deport a 20-year-old US resident. And we have to ask ourselves, why was he arrested? What made this man look like an undocumented immigrant, an illegal alien, despite the fact that he had a birth certificate and social security number presented? And I think we all know the reason. Juan Carlos Lopez Gomez, I think we know the reason. Because this is not a campaign against undocumented people. We've already had stories of folks who were detained by ICE talking about how, like, they're just following around Hispanic people. That's what they're doing. They're finding any Hispanic person that looks out of place, and they're detaining them. and trying to deport them, even if they're citizens. It's disgusting. It is an affront to the very nature of what America is and who we are as people. This shall not be allowed to stand. Okay? People need to fight this. And like genuinely, that might be up to and including like fighting an ICE agent for trying to arrest someone. Because there is no guarantee that an ICE agent is trying to arrest anyone for the actual legal things that within their legal powers. You know, like, we do not know that. We do not know that. We can no longer trust that. There are news stories of communities forming human chains to protect different undocumented folks or people even suspected of being undocumented because they see ICE coming. And we need to do the same. We need to start doing the same. We need to organize and be willing to put ourselves on the line like that. Provide that legal protection. And I keep coming back to this one story we talked about maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago of reports that ICE were disappearing indigenous people in communities near the southern border. I keep coming back to that because I haven't gotten any updates on those stories. I think it was something like 43 people were missing in New Mexico. All here legally. All citizens. Where were they where were they disappeared to? Why were they taken? And we all know why they were taken. It's because they were not white. Okay? It's really scary out there. If you are Hispanic, I would encourage you always have your documents on you. Be vigilant and be safe. And we are going to all fight this. But like, you need to make sure you have what you need to protect yourself when these goons come knocking. Okay, folks? Getting a lawyer is a good idea too. Yeah, if you can afford it. And we have one last update here. Here we have Juan Carlos Lopez Gomez. He was released earlier tonight. Here he is reuniting with his mom. But understand, Donald Trump and this Trump administration would see him disappeared, would see him inside of a concentration camp, would paint him as a terrorist. Whether or not he is, in fact, affiliated with any gang, they would ignore his due process. They would have him tortured and killed in a foreign land for just existing. This administration is a den of monsters, and we need to continue to organize to the best of our abilities to oppose them. The next big protest day is 2 days from now, as of the recording of this video, April 19th. You can find more info on 5051's website, as well as I'm sure you'll find a lot of events over on Indivisible's mobilization page, mobilize.us/indivisible, to find or make your own local event for that. we need to turn out as many of us as possible. Okay? This Saturday, protests in state capitals all across the United States. Yep. We have to keep turning out over and over again. And I know it might get exhausting, folks. I know it might feel real hard, but we got to get out there. Okay? We got to get out there. Can you link that? The video or 5051? Here's 5051. I'll link that here. I'm getting out there. I got my Sic Semper Tyrannis sign. Nice. It's really scary out there, folks, but there is one way out, and that way out is us standing together in solidarity, shouting with one voice, no. Enough is enough. And I've been shouting from the rooftops. I hope you all will join me. So with that being said, let's move on.
Riverboat deck is going to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is switching streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, dating, plenty more. Your sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and